Welcome back to the Idiot's Guide to Philosophy. Today we're going to be dealing with Xenophanes, whatever his name is, and Heraclitus. Okay, let's just jump right in. Question number 14. What was Xenophanes' view of knowledge? Well, this can best be explained with a quote that he left us. He said that if God had not made yellow honey, then men would think that figs were much sweeter. By that he means that sense perception is relative. Not all sense perception is universal. It can't be. I mean, blind people obviously don't have the same sense perception as a deaf person. And question number 15. In what ways did Xenophanes' view differ from the typical Greek view of the gods? Xenophanes in history is called the destroyer of myths. He was a big critic of the Olympian gods and the common perception of how the universe was run, the Homer ideal, I guess. He didn't like how, for example, a storm at sea was the work of Poseidon when it could just as well have been rationally explained by, what we now know to be meteorology. He thought that it was definitely much more sensible to try and rationally explain things rather than just, delegate it to the displeasure of some god. So he was not a fan of Homer. And there's not a whole lot on him, so we're moving on to Heraclitus. And question number 16 asks, according to Heraclitus, what is the logos? Why is it important? Logos is a maddeningly vague concept. It is so ambiguous. The best way I can try to describe it is that it is reason itself. It is logic. It's what binds the galaxy together. It's kind of like the Force. You can think of it as metaphysical duct tape. That's the way a good friend of mine described it to me. That's essentially it. It was kind of like his stab at trying to find out what the universal order that was superior to the gods was. Number 17. Why did Heraclitus say, "You cannot step into the same river twice"? How does this represent his basic view of reality? I love this guy. He is probably one of the most fascinating of the pre-Socratic philosophers that I've looked at so far, at least to me. I really love his idea of the concept of change, and I'm about to explain that. What he means by that is that even though you step into a river, if it's flowing, let's just assume that the river is flowing, it's not the same river from one second to the next. Yes, you're stepping into the collective of water, but it's flowing past you the whole time, and you are not ever dealing with the same water for more than a second. So it's not really the same river from second to second. It's always different depending on where you stand. In the same way, I could look at a picture of myself from the third grade, and it's me obviously, but you can see that it's me from back then. It's a different version of me. Just as I am different now than I will be at age 90. Number 18. What did Heraclitus mean by the unity of opposites? He was kind of a believer in chaos. He believed that the conflict that you get between opposites is a good thing. And by this he means that that some things that are opposite are actually one and the same thing. For example, we could say that day and night, you could say that they're opposites, but they are two phases of one continuous process. They're tied together in that they are a way for us to measure time. And he also used the example of the bow and the lyre to help explain this. He points out that a bow is useless unless you are able to use it in a chaotic fashion. By that he means that when you pull the string, you create a tension in the bowstring. It becomes very tense, full of chaotic energy, and when you release it, it's directed. But if the string is too weak, it snaps. And for a lyre, it only makes music. Any string instrument actually only makes music when there is tension in the strings. So in that way, conflict is harmonious when there is tension in the strings. So in that way, conflict is harmonious. Number 19. What does the image of fire symbolize in Heraclitus' philosophy? Heraclitus is very different from the other materialistic, monist philosophers that we've looked at before. He doesn't believe in fire the same way that, say, Thales believed in water. He believes in it only in a kind of metaphorical way. He doesn't believe that the actual physical presence of fire is what constitutes reality. It is not necessarily the one true ultimate element. But he looks at it and he compares it to reality itself. Fire is always changing. It is never really constant because it's always consuming. It's always consuming something. Fire needs fuel. It needs air. It needs wood or, some substance that it can burn. It needs fuel. And it's kind of similar to reality in that it is always changing from one thing to another. Wood becomes ash. Air becomes part of the fire. And so it's always moving forward, never the same. Number 20. What are the main themes in Heraclitus' moral and social philosophy? Well, again, he believed that the conflict of opposites was a good thing, and he was of the opinion that if you preferred stability, then you were tender-minded, and that only people who really enjoyed living the chaotic life of change were, hard-headed and, capable people. He also had a lot to say about the concept of the law, and how our human law is kind of a reflection, or at least gets some inspiration from, a sort of divine law. He said that God has made all things just and fair and good, or that to God all things are just and fair and good, but men have supposed some things just and some things unjust. By that he means that everything that God created, he created intentionally, and so he sees it all as good, because, if God is good, then surely he sees what he does as being good. So that's kind of a way of tackling the issue of God being evil for having created evil. And Heraclitus would say that no, God is not evil for having created evil, it's just that we suppose that it is evil because we're men, if that makes sense. Well, it's something of a problematic conclusion at best. But it is an honest stab at the truth, and that's pretty much what this pre-Socratic stuff is all about. And that's all I've got on them today. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, go buy Cheetos. They're good for your brain. No, they're not, but they taste good.